Good morning, Abundant Life Church. This is Pastor Chris, and today we're going to be looking at Romans chapter 7, verses 1 down through 6. And I want to start by actually making a confession to you. It's about an addiction that I have. What is my addiction? Chapstick. I carry a tube of chapstick with me everywhere I go. And it's funny because growing up as a kid in the Bay Area, you never use chapstick. It's just a different climate, I guess. I mean, a lifetime supply was like one stick. But then when we moved to higher elevation, particularly when we were in Central Oregon and it was drier, I started carrying chapstick with me all the time. And I started looking for opportunities to add to my chapstick collection. I can remember going to a wedding, and at all the table settings, they had a little tube of chapstick. Well, after the wedding was over, after the reception had ended, people were leaving. I kind of snuck around, and I probably walked out of there with about 20 chapsticks. But here's the thing, I've actually heard that using chapstick makes your lips drier. How on earth is that possible? I'm sure somebody could explain the science to me, but it doesn't seem reasonable that using chapstick would actually make your lips drier. It's that same kind of logic that we're going to talk about here today, logic that on the surface doesn't seem to make sense. Paul has been writing to the Roman church about how grace is not a free license to sin, and grace is better than the law. Okay, everybody would agree with that. But in this passage, he says that the law stirs up sinful passions in people. So the law actually makes you sin more. How can that be? The law was given by God to keep people away from sin. So how could God's law actually make people sin more? That doesn't seem to make any sense. So what did Paul mean here? Well, Paul says the law makes you want to sin more, right? That's what we'll take a look at. Obviously, grace is a better system than the law. Everybody knows that. But does the law really make us want to go out and commit more sins? Look at verses 1 through 3 here. Do you not know, brothers and sisters, for I am speaking to those who know the law, that the law has authority over someone only as long as that person lives? For example, by law, a married woman is bound to her husband as long as he is alive. But if her husband dies, she's released from the law that binds her to him. So then, if she has sexual relations with another man while her husband is still alive, she's called an adulteress. But if her husband dies, she's released from that law and is not an adulteress if she marries another man. All right, Paul is returning to the idea here that we're dead to sin and that sin no longer has authority over us. And he uses this illustration of a husband and wife, and if one of them dies. If a husband dies, his wife is no longer bound by marriage to her. They're no longer bound by marriage. If her husband is still alive, though, and she goes, well, I'm just going to shack up with someone else. Okay, that's breaking the covenant. Again, though, if her husband dies, her obligation to the covenant is nullified. Now, that's what's happening with us. But instead of the law and sin dying, we're the ones who die. We die to sin. We die to the law. Okay? So that covenant is now over, and we're free to belong to Jesus. That's all fine and good. And, we can understand this concept. But what Paul says next, it seems to say he means the law is bad. That can't be. Look at verse 4. So, my brothers and sisters, you also died to the law through the body of Christ, that you might belong to one another, to him who was raised from the dead, in order that we might bear fruit for God. Okay, sure, sin was bad. The law had to be good because it came from God. It was God's idea. And again, we are dead to sin, dead to the law. We belong to grace. But God's law is still a good thing, right? I'm assuming that if you're watching this, you are probably over the age of 10, and you probably know how to ride a bike. Now, it's been years since I actually rode a bike, but I know how to ride one. Everybody learns to ride a bike, though, by putting on training wheels. Your mom and dad put training wheels on your bike so you wouldn't fall over. Okay. Do you still use training wheels? Of course not. So training wheels are evil, right? Wait a minute. Why? No, no, they're just not needed anymore. Now, isn't that what the law is? The law wasn't bad, it wasn't evil, it's just not needed anymore. Keeping that in mind, look at what Paul writes next in verse 5. For when we were in the realm of flesh, the sinful passions aroused by the law were at work in us, so that we bore fruit for death. What aroused our sinful passions? The law. Really? I'm sorry. I think we're pretty good at arousing our own sinful passions. But what does Paul mean here? Was Paul really blaming the law for making us have the desire to sin? How could a law that was given by God and was intended to keep people away from sin actually entice them towards sin? Why would God purposely give a law if it would make people sin? What was Paul talking about here? To find out, tune in next time. Till then, have a great day.